All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about traveling with interstitial cystitis and just general um, optimizing bladder health. So to help me do that, I have Kassie Dewitt with me. She is an occupational therapist. So welcome to the show, Kassie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited. Do you want to take a second to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, so I am Kassie Dewitt. I have a doctorate of occupational therapy. I specialize in pelvic floor rehabilitation. I started my pelvic floor journey because at 16, I had significant pelvic floor dysfunction, including pain. The only thing I haven't had is IC. So there's that. UTIs, yeast infections, bacterial infections, pelvic pain, a ton of urinary leakage, up all night peeing. So I had the gamut of pelvic floor dysfunction, and that's what led me into now helping women with their pelvic floor dysfunction.
Awesome. What
Yeah.
helped you the most on your journey?
Um, not just taking medication. I mean, when I first went to the doctors at 16, my first urinary leakage episode was when I was serving a volleyball at my high school varsity game. And when I went to the doctor, because then it happened over and over and over, and I was an athlete, and they just kept saying, oh, it's because you're an athlete and you're getting a really great workout in. And then it was getting progressively worse. I was getting up all night. I wasn't doing well the next day because I had no sleep, right? I was leaking urine all the time, urgency, frequency, and they just kept prescribing medication after medication and more of the same medication. And that had significant side effects and nothing was getting better, right? So nobody talked to me about a holistic plan. It was like, take these medications. If it gets bad enough, we can do surgery. So at the age of 19, I was diagnosed with a bladder and rectal prolapse. I had significant constipation. I had anxiety, so I was constantly tense. Um, and that correlates with all the pain I was having too. And so then I was told to just do more Kegels. That made the situation so much worse. And by the age of 23, they had me in menopause. I had done surgery, all the different things until I went to a pelvic floor therapist and she's like, what does your diet look like? And I was like, excuse me? It looks like cigarettes, vodka, and Taco Bell, to be honest. I mean, that's I was in college. It was, yeah. So she was like, I want you to stop doing Kegels. I'm like, no, I leak urine, right? I have to do the Kegels because I'm not strong enough. And she's like, you're not strong because your muscles aren't moving. They're so tense. And so it was just a totally different viewpoint where when I first went to her, I remember thinking this is such a joke because surgery and medication doesn't work. My body is completely broken and there's nothing anybody can do to help me. And she was like, we're going to breathe and look at your nutrition. And I was like, oh my God, this lady is nuts. But that holistic viewpoint, right, took me on a totally different path and made me so much aware of like what I'm actually putting in my body dictates how I function, right? So that was probably the biggest light bulb that's ever gone off in my lifetime.
I'm still dying at the cigarettes, alcohol, and Taco Bell. That's so funny.
It never once was asked. Nobody asked. They would say, do you drink water? Sure. Maybe, a couple glasses a day, if that. Then at nighttime, there was a ton of alcohol, 2 o'clock Taco Bell runs. I smoked cigarettes when I drank. I mean, oh, my poor body. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
But I
goodness.
was never asked those things.
Yeah. So you're kind of over all of that now. Do you feel like it's all managed?
All managed. There is no, I can tell now, of course, I don't drink, I don't smoke, my diet's healthy, right? I take an active role in my exercise routine every single day. I'm mindful, I rest, I manage my stress totally different. Uh, and I have no symptoms. I have no prolapse anymore. I've had 3 babies. I'm pregnant with my fourth. I have no leakage, no urgency, no frequency. I sleep through the night. I have no pain with intercourse. I have no hip or back pain. I've had, like I said, my pregnancies really terrified me thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to all start over again, but it didn't. Well,
Amazing.
yes.
Was because when you said you got prolapse at like 19, is that considered young for that?
Yeah. And prolapses, so for your listeners who don't know what pelvic organ prolapse is, it's our pelvic floor is like a hammock of musculature that holds up the bladder, rectum, and uterus, right? So those muscles need to be coordinated and they need to be strong to do the job that they are built to do. So I tell women, I'm like, anytime urine leaves your body without permission, we have an issue that we need to discuss and fix before it gets worse. With my prolapse, I had such bad constipation. So my constipation was I either didn't have bowel movements or it was like water. I'm guessing the water, like liquid poop, was from the vodka.
It
It's
has
a
to
day
be
that
the
Taco
vodka.
Bell is there too. No, right? So it's there was so much straining that went on, whether I had the quote diarrhea or the harder stool. And then because I had so much anxiety, and that anxiety just right when, and yeah, I know you feel this too with IC, the mental component of these dysfunctions is so significant and it's never addressed. Like, what does this do? Like, never one did someone ask me about my nutrition, but never one time did someone analyze how are you mentally doing with peeing your pants all the time, wearing pads all the time, having all this pain all the time. Like, how's your brain doing? Nobody ever asked me that question. So the anxiety just built. And then I know you feel this too, when you don't have, when nothing is working, it's almost like, am I making this up in my head? Is it really that bad? Am I being a baby? Am I not tough enough? All these different things we think in our head, that just made my anxiety through the roof. So I was constantly tense. I was like clenching my butt cheeks, clenching my jaw, sucking in my stomach. And that never allowed for my pelvic floor muscles to move. So I had really weak pelvic floor muscles. And then I had this constant straining, holding my breath that caused the prolapse. Now, nobody told me that. I just know that now that's how it happened. Childbirth typically is what causes your organs to sink down closer to your vaginal opening, that's the pelvic organ prolapse. So my bladder was trying to exit the building, and so is my rectum.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that mental health component. Growing up with bladder pain, nobody around me was complaining of bladder issues whatsoever. And I just sucked it up because I didn't think I had another option. So
Right.
I get it. It really takes over your life. Like, what if, like, when I was diagnosed and I started learning more, it's like, well, what if this drink I'm about to have triggers me? What if wearing jeans is going to cause a flare up? Like, it's a lot. And that does take a very big mental and emotional toll. And it's just exhausting. Like, the mental hurdles we go through with these conditions is just exhausting.
It's exhausting. Yeah. And then the pain, there's a whole other neurological component to pain, right? Like this chronic pain you go through with IC, or with me, it was more of just chronic pain in the vulva. There, it's almost like your brain chemistry changes, your tolerance changes, your patience changes, right? Like my threshold was minuscule for before I would either blow up, cry, just not be able to manage any kind of emotion appropriately. And then you look and you feel in your mind, quote, crazy. And I remember the doctors looking at me and being like, I don't think it's that bad. Are you like, is everything else okay? That was as
You just
close
want to
as
punch them in the face when they say
you
that.
do. Like,
Oh,
I don't know. I'm wearing a pad all the time and I'm 19 and my organs are falling out and I can't poop. Yeah, things are pretty bad right now. So, and that could have been honestly why I think for college, I drank and had all this fun. And I think it had to have been a way of me coping, right? Of this,
I did the same thing.
yeah,
I really did. Just like I was in um denial that
yeah,
I had this condition. I was like, okay, I can't find anything that'll help me, so I'm just gonna live my life and suck it up. And that's what
yeah,
I did.
yeah,
And yeah, no
yeah.
Taco Bell for me, but there were other things that I got into.
I will say I had Taco Bell a couple of weeks ago and I was like, I cannot believe I ate this on a weekly basis, probably on a daily basis. Oh my lordy, my poor
Oh.
body.
So you had the prolapse, and this wasn't a topic I was expecting to talk about, but I actually would love to talk about it a little bit more if you're cool with that.
Mhm.
So treatment wise for prolapse, I know there's like surgeries you can do, but can pelvic floor physical therapy like help resolve that?
Sure. So the prolapse is graded 1 through 4. So 1 being a very tiny prolapse, 2's right, like in front of the vaginal opening, 3's at vaginal opening, 4 is outside the body. Now that's a very quick overview. There's instruments that measure and all the things. And a pelvic floor therapist is not supposed to diagnose or grade it. But if you are ever diagnosed with a prolapse, you ask the grade from the physician. And so, um, and then you ask what organ. That's important. And that's knowledge that absolutely is yours to know. And so in research, we see pelvic floor therapy changing a grade of prolapse by like 2 grades. Now, if you're grade 4, surgery is indicated because there's other parts of the pelvic floor, like the ligaments, that can become stretched out, and we can't make those stronger. Ligaments are like a stretched out rubber band. Like you're never getting that rubber band back to its size again unless you like tie it up, just like you would a ligament holding a bladder or rectum or wherever. So there is surgery always indicated for grade 4. Some people aren't candidates for surgery, right? So then we would do a pessary, which is like a circular disc that the organ would like sit on. You put it in your vaginal canal and it kind of bulks those sides up so the organs have some place to sit. My oldest patient was 87 and her had a complete um, prolapse outside the body. It's like one of those things where you're like, school did not train me for this. What am I going to do? But she was not a surgical candidate. So anytime there's prolapse, grade 4, grade 1, we have to do pelvic floor rehab with it. Whether you're having surgery or not having surgery, you have to learn how to manage your breath mechanics. And it's something that goes so missed. The doctors are like, let's have surgery. And then I worked with phenomenal doctors, but the patients that came to me, their stories were never with these phenomenal doctors, right? So they think they're having this surgery, they'll never prolapse again. Well, if you never change any habits, surgery is only going to go so far, right? Like we're back to holding our breath. And if I never got the constipation under control or anything of that, surgery would have never gone very far. So it's important to learn like the habits, the nutrition, the position and posture on the toilet, how to strengthen your pelvic floor, because one of the functions of the pelvic floor is to hold those organs up. So, yeah, you can make us, and I had women who had a grade 3, which is right there at vaginal opening. So you can imagine like sex isn't great, wearing a tampon isn't great, OBGYN appointments isn't great. Some people have pain, some people just felt like a tampon was constantly falling out, some just had pressure. And and I'd have brand new moms that are like, I don't have time for surgery. For one, I have a triplet mom. She was like 5 months postpartum. She's like, I'm not having surgery. I have triplets. Like, what can I do? And she had a grade 3. And so we just worked on breath mechanics, strengthening glutes, pelvic floor. Her symptoms went completely away. There was nothing. Sex was fine. Orgasming was great. There was no leakage, but the prolapse really didn't change from my point of view in terms of grade. So I call that a complete win. Now, will she eventually probably have to have surgery? Probably, but she has a much longer trajectory of when that has to happen.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And a doctor should be able to see this, or does it not always like show and they have to like feel it?
Um, like when they're doing an exam.
Yeah, sorry,
They
in the
should,
beginning.
whenever they do a pelvic floor exam, they like anytime I did a pelvic floor exam internally, I would have the patient bear down and also contract to see if there's any movement of these organs and where they're at. And every time I've been to, not every time, let me take that back. I have been tested with my requests. So I don't know if they just do it standard of care when you go in, but I've always had a request. Hey, can you check and see if there's any prolapse? I have some pressure. I'm feeling some dryness. And then they can check. And you can tell, well, when you go in and ask a doctor to check, you want details on what they're looking at, how they assess it, what the grade, what is the organ. Ask them a lot of questions, because if you feel for 1 second that that doctor doesn't know what they're doing, we need to assess that, because we want to always keep those organs really safe. And so I think a urogynecologist is so good at grading and assessing prolapse.
Okay. And you mentioned you had some symptoms, like you said pressure, right? Is that something
Yeah.
that's common among people with prolapse?
Yeah, so you'll have pelvic pressure, you'll feel like a tampon is coming out, pain with intercourse, pain with OBGYN appointments, like even finger penetration can be just, it might not be painful, but it doesn't feel great, you know? So I have women who it's excruciating painful, and I have women who say there's no pain, it just feels like it's falling out of me.
Yeah, and
So,
you hear these symptoms a lot with like interstitial cystitis, and it could cross over with even vaginismus or pelvic floor dysfunction, right?
right, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so step one would be go to a urogynecologist.
I think so. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, you just taught me a lot about prolapse, so thank you for
Good.
that.
Good. Yeah, I
Uh,
have no prolapse after carrying 3 babies and having a grade 2 bladder and rectal. I cured it with pelvic floor therapy. But I think one of the things too, and I know you know this too, is that when symptoms go away, we don't go back to our old habits, right? So I think that's so important when women have surgery or even do pelvic floor rehab and they're feeling so much better. We never go back to what we were doing before. But if you're not taught how to manage those habits and change them to good ones, we are going to be right back to where we were before, right?
yeah, we can't go back to cigarettes,
Cannot,
Taco Bell, and
cannot go
vodka.
back to the cigarettes and vodka. That
No.
time is left me. It was a fun time. I remember it very fondly, but we're done with that. I haven't drink alcohol in so long. It would probably be like if I smelled alcohol, it would make me tipsy. And then I'd be like, where are my cigarettes?
Oh my goodness. All right, perfect. I feel like this is the perfect time for us to transition into traveling
Yeah,
because we have, Memorial Day is coming up. Lots of people have vacations over the summer, and a lot of people are reaching out to me saying like, "Hey, I'm really nervous about traveling and I don't know if it's gonna flare my icy symptoms." So I actually saw you had posted a couple weeks ago a video of how you travel without any sort of bladder symptoms. So that's why I initially reached out to you
yeah.
to talk about this topic.
Yes. I think if you go into traveling being like, I'm nervous, am I gonna have these symptoms? You're most likely gonna have these symptoms. I want you to take like supercharge of your health and wellness. And so with me, I will even bring an extra suitcase just so I can have the things I need to have. Like I don't travel without my squatty potty. I don't travel without the cup that I use for my hydration. I don't travel without my minerals to help with my hydration, right? I don't change my diet drastically on vacation, right? And we don't stop moving our bodies. But there's a component to traveling that I think we all go through. It's so exciting. It's so fun. And our nervous system's like, this is fun and it's exciting, but I'm also like this scared. Is like the plane gonna crash? Are your cats okay? Is the kids gonna be okay? Is your door locked? Is your garage door closed? Like we go through all these things, right? Did I pack enough? Did I pack too much? And so that I feel like we kind of frazzle our nervous system before we even get in the car to leave on vacation.
Definitely. Yeah, and then there's the other layer of like, is my IC going to flare?
Right.
All of those mental hurdles. So I think we can break this into two different parts. Like the first part is traveling and actually the mode of transportation. So whether you're driving, flying, taking a train, whatever. And then once you're there, what are you doing? What does your nutrition look like? Your fluid intake, your physical activity, your bowel movements, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I mean, I fly a lot. I'm not really a driver, but a lot of people like to drive places.
Mm-hmm.
And these are very stressful things when you're dealing with something like IC. It's like, okay, am I in a window seat on the airplane? That's really stressful. You don't want to bother someone in the aisle seat to go to the bathroom a bunch of times. Or if you're in a car, you don't want to make everybody stop every 10, 15 minutes because you have to pee.
Right.
So, are you, Kassie, are you someone who prefers driving over flying, or do you do both?
No, so I used to fly for work twice a week for 8 years and I loved it. And actually, I'm redoing my master class right now. And the first story I tell is the anxiety that an airplane provoked because I had overactive bladder, right? So different than IC, but similar symptoms. And I didn't have the bladder pain. I just had so much urination and I would go sit down on the toilet. You're supposed to go to the bathroom 5 to 7 times in a 24-hour period is what is considered quote normal. And I would go 15 to 17 times, right? Like squeezing every ounce of liquid out of my body. And so I remember an aisle seat was an absolute non-negotiable for me because I had to be able to get to the toilet. And when we were loading the plane, there was such an anxiety and fear that I could not get to the toilet, right? So that anxiety just provoked my bladder to, I always pictured it like thumping away. My visualization, I was like, it's vibrating, we gotta go. And so I much rather uh, well, then I didn't have a choice, but I still love to fly. I love to, and when you fly, your body requires so much more hydration. So even if we skip or if we stay at the same amount of hydration, say you hydrate so well, when you fly, you have to increase that hydration. Our body's demands are different in the air. And so, and if not, right, we turn our urine more acidic, which makes our bladder inflammation more significant and less tolerant. And then you're in the bathroom all the time and you most likely have bladder spasms or pain. And so I think I'm a huge flyer. I travel a lot now because my little girl's in travel soccer, so we're in the car a lot. And that seems to almost agitate my bladder more, like the jiggling of the car for a couple, 3 hours. Yeah. So
Mhm.
what about
Yeah.
you? Car or plane?
I do a lot of plane travel. I actually just booked a trip to Aruba, and I'm gonna already have been on this trip when this episode comes out. So hopefully it goes well. But I was
Yeah.
looking at the seat selection because I'm someone who I like the aisle seat just for peace of mind because I don't like to bother people to like let me out. Um, and I was looking at the seat selection and all they had was middle seats. And I was like, I'm not doing that. So we
Yeah.
actually found a different flight because of that. And I ended up with a window seat, which isn't ideal because it's a 5-hour flight. But for me, I usually pick the aisle seat unless it's a morning flight and I don't really pee in the morning and I don't drink a whole lot. That's just me. So I'll do a window seat if it's a morning flight. But
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are kind of in that same mindset where it's like, oh, we're people pleasers. We don't want to bother other people. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, nah. just bother them. Like it's
Bother
not,
them.
we all
Yeah.
pee. Like if you have to go a couple times, it's okay. I think we're all just very self-conscious. If you can get an aisle seat, that's, obviously the better option, but you can always like talk to the flight attendant, see if they can move you if possible. Like there's ways that you can make things more comfortable and less anxiety provoking. And then
Yes.
for me, like before the flight, like the days before, I'm like on top of my nutrition, I'm on top of my hydration. I want to make sure everything is good. I don't want to be dehydrated going into the trip.
Hmm.
So I will do that and then I'll cut my fluids off, I would say 2 hours before just to, make sure I don't have a lot of urine in my bladder. But then once I'm on the plane, then I start drinking because like you said, there is a higher need for fluids.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think uh, for my side of the rehab department, they have, my women will dehydrate themselves to leak less urine,
Hmm.
right? Or to not have to go to the bathroom more frequently. I did this too. And like I said, when we dehydrate ourselves, our urine's more acidic and that is inflammatory to the bladder lining. So you have pain or you have frequency. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then with car travel, I mean, I don't do a whole lot of it, but I've heard from a lot of pelvic floor physical therapists, like if you need a donut in the car, or maybe you just need to adjust the way that you're sitting, that can be helpful. I don't know if you have any other car travel tips.
Yeah, so for me, when I was a kid, we didn't fly anywhere and you weren't stopping. Like we always went from I'm in South Carolina now, but we went from Kansas City to Indiana and we were not stopping at all. Like my mom packed a cooler if we needed gas. It was like 2 hours from, where we were going. So we went 6, 8 hours without stopping. And there was always this stress, like anxiety that you can't ask mom to stop. We got to get there. Like we were always in a hurry. And I'm so much more relaxed. Like if my babies say, "Hey mom, I need to go to the bathroom," it does not bother me because I will get to where I'm going. Even when we have like a hard deadline, we have to be there by this time, which I try really hard not to live my life that way at all. But say that's the circumstance, we're still going to get there safely. And so a lot of mine is just mindfulness, right? Like you can stop if need be, right? Even if there's no bathroom in sight, we still can pop a squat somewhere. Like we can cover. I just tell my husband's like, well, what if there's not another bathroom? I'm like, we'll figure it out. Like there's no need to create more anxiety and stress. And I know not everybody's as comfortable with those things as I am, but I think if you can be mindful that it is going to be okay, you can stop. You're not in your mother's vehicle anymore. You're in your own. You can make your own time. I think that's so helpful. I think the donut and things like that. I have a lot of women who have pelvic pain or like coccyx pain or tailbone pain, and they ride with a donut. I think being comfortable in your car, so like bringing a blanket or having whatever you feel most comfortable, a book to read, a Kindle, or whatever you feel good doing. I think that's really important. But
Hmm.
being mindful that you can always stop if you need to if you need to stop. And even when there's not toilets, we still have a way of getting evacuating urine.
Yeah.
So, and I've had women who live in New York City where toilets are not available, like public toilets are not available, which I had no idea. And I was like, what do you do? Because that's an area you can't just go to the bathroom wherever you want, right? Like if there's no toilets available, you cannot pee on the side of the street without the possibility of getting arrested. So
Right. You got
I
to
mean,
buy something somewhere.
you have to do something. So just knowing that you have the capability of figuring it out and there's no need to stress because that higher anxiety, the higher the stress does do does nothing for your bladder and health.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think another part of it in terms of car travel is being with people you're comfortable with. I think if
Sure.
you're with not strangers, but like friends and acquaintances who maybe don't know your full situation, I think that is
Right.
also very anxiety provoking. So
Yeah.
you're comfortable with them, or if you're comfortable having that conversation with them, that can be helpful. I don't know if you have any tips on that.
And if you're not comfortable with someone, or I've always been a very open book, but my husband is very private. Like I will tell the grocery store clerk about whatever, like I've never had that problem, but my husband's very private. And so I'm trying to think of it from his point of view. And if his anxiety was so high, or if it was so, he was so uncomfortable, he would just drive himself. And sometimes that is like a better option if you feel like you're going to burden people and there's so much anxiety and you're already got your bladder thumping away before you've even packed. Like, let's look at other alternatives. Or can you take the train? Or, those things, just knowing we have a way out and there's a way to solve the problem to give you your most comfort, I think is important to remember.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. So once people get to their destination, whatever they're doing, if they're on vacation or they're doing a really active trip of some sort, so how are they going to manage their health, their bladder, and prevent flare-ups when they're there? So
Mhm.
like I mentioned earlier, my brain goes to when you're traveling, there's a higher risk of being dehydrated. Like you may not have that much access to water, or you may not be thinking about it. Maybe you're more active than you're used to, and that could be dehydrating you. Maybe you're eating different foods. You're at like a resort of some sort, and the foods are just really different. There's a lot of factors that come into play when you're traveling. And
Mhm.
I don't know about you, Cassie, but whenever I travel, I get traveler's constipation, and it's the most annoying thing on this whole planet.
It's so funny. I went to a retreat last year and then one in January. And I take my squatty potty everywhere I go with me. And I have no shame in it, right? And first, understanding the requirements my body needs. Like I am such a routine girl that no matter where I'm at, traveling with my kids, traveling alone, I try to keep the same routine. I'm up, I'm doing my 3 mile walk, I'm eating my breakfast, I'm drinking my water, I'm taking my same supplements. So it's like my environment has changed, but my routine hasn't changed drastically. I control it as much as I can. And then for food is hard. I think food is like the really hard part, right? Because like you're going to Aruba, the food will be different, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're equipped with knowing I can't eat that. That's not going to sit well with me. Maybe I'll try this, or maybe I'll ask them again, not people pleasing, but asking if they could cook it in without all the inflammatory, whatever it is, right? So I always teach through knowledge first and action second, because I feel like if my patients or students have the knowledge of what irritates them and how they can control it, they feel so much more equipped to make really great decisions when they are in these really fun circumstances of traveling and eating new foods and trying new things. But I would say just keeping your routine as close to home as you can. My Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays don't look any different than my Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, right? Like, and that, when I always travel up to Michigan to see my in-laws, and it's so weird because even just that we're in the same time zone, but it's so dark there for so long in the morning. And that's when I do my morning walk. And so I have to really plan, like, when can I do this? I still have control. My mother-in-law is a fantastic cook, but what she cooks, I'm just like, I will poop my pants. Like I cannot eat all that, right? I cannot do that. I'll get a UTI. That's another thing I think with traveling is UTIs. And if we try to keep with that same routine, I think it's so helpful in decreasing stress, increasing mindfulness, and just knowing how much control we do have. As soon as we feel like we don't have any control, that is when stuff hits the fan. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I just had a client go on a cruise right in the middle of her elimination diet. And I always say, it's the best way to do things if you can, if you have the time, is to do an elimination diet to figure out,
Mhm.
do you have diet triggers? Do you not? Okay. If you don't, that's amazing. Now you have that knowledge and that freedom to do what you want. And if you
Right,
do have diet triggers, then at least you know what they are. At least you don't have to be like on alert the entire time, walking on eggshells, hoping something isn't going to flare you, or just like avoiding every single, bladder unfriendly item, which
right,
that's exhausting. So
right.
it's like having that knowledge is important, but I know that, maybe somebody just got diagnosed and they're going on a trip in like a week or two. It's like,
That's tough.
okay, that's gonna be difficult, but you can get through it. You can pack your own food and bring it on the plane. I mean, you're not gonna bring a lot, but that can get you, at least a day or two of like what you're going to be eating, and then maybe you can grocery shop when you're there. Maybe,
I mean,
there's
we're still lucky now, really, truly, because you can have groceries delivered to wherever you're staying, basically all over the United States, at least. I don't know. I don't travel out of the country very often. Um, we just went on a cruise, and obviously the food there, my husband's a type 1 diabetic, and the food there, even when he's eating, quote, healthy, whole food nutrition, his blood sugar is so much higher because it's just different. He could be eating a chicken breast here versus a chicken breast there. It's different. His blood sugar is higher. And so I think those are the things that we cannot control, right? Like if you cannot control it, there is no need to perseverate on, oh my gosh, this is gonna, just raising the anxiety. Doing what you can control. Okay, I can't control the food. Can I control my stress? Can I control my rest? Can I control my movement? Can I control my hydration? Did I bring my supplements? Like those things. I think also I'm so glad you brought up the food, because in the beginning of my career, when people would come in and see me for IC, the only thing that they ever, quote, treated or discussed with these patients before they saw me was food triggers. And I'm like, you could have zero food triggers. Did you know that?
exactly.
No, they're like, I can't figure it out. And I'm like, maybe you don't have food triggers. And they're like, no, the doctor said it was food related. And I'm like, no, it's not. It doesn't have to be food related. It absolutely can be. Food, especially in our society, just highly inflammatory how they produce it, but it doesn't mean that your body reacts to it the way that other people. Now, I've had people with significant food triggers, and I've had people with no food triggers. So I think that's important too, and just realizing you have control. What you can control. What you cannot, you cannot.
Hmm. Yeah, and you kind of mentioned that when you travel, you bring your all the things that you need, like your supplements and
All the
stuff.
things.
So I think bringing those like quote unquote flare busters with you just in case can give you peace of mind and obviously can help you through a flare. So if you have to bring your Azo, your Urabel, um, an
Do you
ice
ever
pack,
do like freeze dried aloe vera
yeah,
through Desert Harvest or
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Whatever, I mean, whatever people are doing, everyone's so different. So it's
Yeah.
whatever you need. For me, I'll bring like I have this fire crotch balm that I use. It's like a cooling type thing, and I'll bring that. But luckily, I don't really need any like medications anymore. But it,
So great.
it does give you peace of mind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just traveling and embracing that I am like a super positive person. I'm sure someone's listening to this and being like in the middle of a flare up and thinking, God, she's a nightmare. Um, because I was in such a despair time period for years, right? Like I was so depressed, so anxious. I felt like I had no control over anything. that my body had failed me, all these different things, traveling road trips, I just had zero interest in doing any of it. This is the part where like the OT side of me comes out, because we have these occupations that we absolutely love and want to be a part of, but we give those things up with all these dysfunctions. And so figuring out how we can get back to what we love with the control we have. And I think just knowledge and education is so important. And following someone who's been there, like learn from someone who's had it, who's gone through it, who's experienced it like you. I'm not taking advice from someone who's never experienced it. Like, don't tell me it's normal to leak your urine when you're not leaking urine. You have no idea what it feels like, right? Don't tell me, just take this medication and your flare-ups will go away. You've never experienced that, right? So I think it's really important to just, learn from people that have experienced, who have knowledge and education. Remember that you can only control what you can control, and do your very, very best and enjoy your time. Like that's
Exactly.
such a big point. And keep your routine as much as you can. It's not going to be the same. If I travel without my kids, I have 3 kids under the age of 7. If I travel without them, my days look a lot different. But the things I do for myself, the journaling, the reading, the walking, the hydrating, all the same. I do
Mhm.
all the same things. So
Yeah. No, it sounds like you do a great job of prioritizing yourself in those
it only
moments.
took 20 years, because remember, it was cigarettes and vodka for a long time.
Oh, we will never forget that. Oh, it's so great. Another thing I forgot to mention that a lot of people in the IC community do or just talk about is pre-leaf. It can help you get through situations like travel. I don't recommend using pre-leaf unless you've done an elimination diet and you know what your triggers are, but
Mhm.
it can be that band-aid solution if you get desperate and you really just
Yeah,
want to enjoy a drink when you're on vacation.
absolutely. And Band-Aid solutions are phenomenal for short periods of time. Like I always harp on pads. I'm always like, oh, pads, they like market it to you. And you feel sexy in pads. Nobody feels sexy pulling up a pull up or putting a pad on, right? Because they're leaking urine. But they're great Band-Aid solutions to get you to be able to do what you want to do that day, right? So if you want to drink on vacation, then do what you need to do for that short period of time. No guilt, no shame, and go on about yourself, and know that when you get home, it will be different, right? You'll get back to your normal routine and doing all the things.
Exactly. I love
I agree.
that. So, I mean, it sounds like the general recommendation or suggestion of what we've been talking about here is really managing that stress and minimizing that stress because that's like the number one thing that's going to trigger you.
Absolutely. Like when they tell you food is the only trigger, I promise you stress triggers you more.
Yeah. Oh,
Stress triggers
100%.
every single negative stress on the body is actually desired and needed, but there's a threshold of stress that our bodies cannot manage. So then we have these flare-ups like bladder pain or spasms or urinary frequency or urgency or leakage or constipation. Like there's all these headaches. If I'm overstressed, I can't sleep and I have headaches, right? So managing the stress, I think, is number one for to help control it. And that's probably the hardest one to learn how to control too.
Yes, it is. I think, knowledge, learning about your nervous system, how it works. We have lots of episodes on that in this podcast, so just go back. But once you're aware of it and you have that baseline knowledge, I feel like things just start to get better very slowly.
Yeah. And knowing that it's not an overnight fix. Like I get this on my side, and I know this happens on your side too. The women have been like, oh, I've been doing this for 3 weeks and I see nothing. And it's like, it took me 2 years. Some
It's
people it
been a
takes,
year-long journey for me, like multiple
yeah.
years. Yeah.
And it took years of me trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. because what works for your body might not work for my body. So I think that's where getting to know yourself. I was talking to a lady in my messages last night, and I think when you're managed by a care team, which I absolutely love my care team now, but when you're being fed all this negative, like there's nothing you can do, and this is all I can do for you, and this is just how it has to be, that can get really in our head. And we take those words that someone else outside our body is telling us about our body, and we use it as gospel. Nobody knows your body better than you. So I think remembering that, like being the strongest advocate for yourself and learning, paying attention, like, right? Like you have to pay it. You didn't get to where you're at now because you weren't paying attention to how certain things made you feel. Right? Like I eventually had to come to the realization that Taco Bell was doing nothing for me, right? Like vodka and cigarette smoking was not going to work for my bladder,
Right.
right? I think it's so funny. I had a 26-year-old guy who wet the bed his whole life. And how debilitating, right? Like he can't date, he can't do the things he wants to do. He's embarrassed, he's ashamed, all the things. And I said, what do you eat? What do you drink? Like, tell me in more depth. And he goes, well, I drink water. And I'm like, do you drink beer? Like just coming out and really real, like if you were embarrassed to tell someone what you do with your lifestyle in terms of food and drink, I don't feel like you have to share anything else, but we need to realize that maybe that's not the best avenue for you. It took me 2 weeks for him to tell me that he smoked. And he goes, how do you quit smoking? And I'm like, you poop and get off the pot. Like it's a done deal. You just stop doing that because it's not worth, and I quit smoking, so I can say that. You just stop doing what doesn't agree with your body. And that makes you feel really empowered and strong.
Yeah. And I'm sure that one specifically is a lot easier said than done, but there
For
are
sure.
resources
Like
out there.
I can say now all day that I quit smoking. It was no big deal. But I think I carried around a pack of cigarettes in my car and in my house for 2 years before I was okay with being like, okay, I'm no longer a smoker. Um, but I also had to make that really hard realization that I know it's not doing anything for me, that it's helping me reach my goals. And if your goals is not to have bladder pain and to manage the IC, we have to decrease the inflammation through stress management, getting rid of like inflammatory products like smoking, alcohol. Yeah.
Right.
I also tell my people it's not like all or nothing, immediate, like you have to get rid of everything right now. Don't over stress your body to get rid of things to see if that helps. Like do what you can do and make a strong effort. And some
Yeah.
days are better than others, right?
Yep.
Have our good days and we all have our not so good days.
Sure do.
I
Oh my goodness. Is there anything else you wanted to say on this topic before we wrap this up?
don't think so. I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of fun things today.
Amazing. So, where can the listeners find you, and are you currently doing any sort of like fun offers?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm just all over the place at Dr. Kassie Dewitt. Cassie's with a K, Kassie Dewitt, Dewitt. And there I do have a free masterclass coming up on June 4th. It's going to be all about pelvic floor health and wellness. That's live. It's my first live event. I'm pretty excited about that. And then I do have an online course called Urine Good Company that helps women just really improve their pelvic floor health, stop leaking urine, fix their prolapse symptoms, all the things. So yeah.
Amazing. I will link
Fun
all of
stuff.
that in the show notes.
Thank you, dear.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cassie. This has been really fun and helpful.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And everybody who's traveling this summer, you can do it. You've got this. Enjoy yourselves.
Yes, enjoy yourself.